Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about media production, and our second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. And today, we're going to be talking about what we're going to talk about. So next year, we're going to talk about what we talked about last year, over the last year, and then we're going to talk about what we want to talk about in the new year. So usually we do these brainstorming sessions every once in a while. This one's a little different than the other ones because we're really taking a retrospective of looking at the last year and talking about what we liked and didn't like. So if you've got certain shows that you liked, go ahead and throw those in. Use the question system using Makana as a suggestion guide, so you don't have to ask questions about what we talked about. Just suggest things. What were your favorite shows in audio on Wednesdays? And what would you like us to talk about more? So go ahead and throw those into Makana right now. If you don't have Makana, you can jump into you can just go to askofficehours.global. There's a little QR code right there. That's askofficehours.global. You can put questions in any time of the day. If you see this, suggestions this morning, but if you're watching this later, if you can ask questions any time of the day and we'll get those into the system the following day. So anyway, go ahead and throw those in, askofficehours.global. Let's go ahead and jump into those questions. Bill, what do we have?
Our first one comes from Mark Steele in Orlando, Florida, and Mark says, saw this last night in Discord from Chris Sabato, Canon's multi-camera control app for iOS, and he's got the link there to it.
Go, Jeff.
So this is an iOS app that allows you to have some control over a few of their cameras. I think there's 3 EOS and 1 camcorder via Wi-Fi. I could really see it being useful for recording start and stops, checking how much space is remaining or time is remaining in your record. It gives you a preview of the screen, so I guess you could use it to set exposure and things like that, but I would want to compare that via the app to what you look at on a screen. But I could see a real use for this when you have a camera in a sort of remote-ish location in a live situation where you don't want someone to walk up and make adjustments to the camera, sort of like, you have a camera placed secretly somewhere. It'd be a great way to start and stop those. So I just wonder about Wi-Fi, whether you're going to need to have a separate dedicated Wi-Fi for this system.
Yeah, I don't know how it works here. They're all different. Blackmagic uses Bluetooth. Sony uses Wi-Fi. And with Sony's, I know that you do need to, it'll jump onto it builds its own Wi-Fi network from the phone. I don't know how the Canon one works there, but it does build it from the phone. And so your phone loses all connectivity when it connects to the camera. So it's because it's connecting to the camera there. It's I think Canon's a little late to the game, but it's good that they're finally adding it. Go ahead, Bill.
For people who are in the Canon ecosystem, and particularly people with good budgets, here's their webpage for this. It looks like it's got a pretty good iPhone interface, well thought out, remote application. I was a little surprised. It's limited to just the new series, either the C cameras, the cinema cameras from Canon, and they are not inexpensive. I'm also, that poor XF605 looks a little lonely up in the upper right-hand corner compared to all the other ones. But I looked at it online, and even B&H, the price for this camera without a lens package is close to $10,000. So if you're going to do multi-camera with 3 cameras, your starting thing is about $30,000 if you want to go up to the C500 Mark II. Now, I'm sure that XF605 is less expensive, but still, I can see there's people out there, particularly people who have a large Canon glass library, which is one of the advantages of these, because if you have the standard EF series lenses, they work really beautifully with these Canon cameras, but that still means you're in a pretty expensive ecosystem. And with how fast the iPhone thing is.
I think it's, sorry. I still live in a world where $10,000 is not a lot for a camera. So I don't know if it's that expensive. I think that what it does do is it corrects a problem that Canon has, which is that the interfaces for a lot of these cameras, their cameras on the camera are just atrocious. It's the worst interface. It's just really I used to get so angry. I finally stopped renting. I would rent these cameras, 300s and 500s, and I just stopped renting them because I just couldn't stand the interfaces. So it didn't matter what it did anywhere else outside of that. So the interface actually looks pretty nice for how it's connecting and how it's managing that. I think that the challenge will be, that it doesn't cover a lot of cameras there. I will say that if you watch the video, it's kind of all the things not to do in a corporate video. I don't know, Jeffrey could probably comment on it, but it looked like they were trying a little too hard to talk to YouTubers. Go ahead, Jeffrey. Jeffrey, did you watch the, we're going to lost Jeffrey there just for a second. Anyway,
yeah, Jeffrey froze before. He may have done it again.
Yeah. So if the video has got the most, some super cheese, very, very, a lot of cheddar in the music. And then the lighting is a little overly YouTube. So for what he was doing there. So anyway, I probably would have pulled that back a little bit. It is good to have. I kind of feel like this is table stakes at this point, being able to have a phone connect to your camera. It's, obviously the Blackmagic cameras have the advantage of connecting and really being able to have a lot of real-time control with your switcher. But Sony, you get used to it. I use it all the time, like to make adjustments. And the real thing is, it's not so much in production. If I'm using the camera by myself, being able to open up a phone app and make adjustments to the camera while I can still see it, it's pretty important. Next question.
Next one comes to us from John Foltz in Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania. My students create simple podcasts to learn audio recording and editing, and they'd like to publish them. What free publishing platform should I recommend?
Go ahead, Ronnie.
We always used Anchor, which is now podcast by Spotify or for Spotify, and I think it's still free. So just check that out, and I'll think you'll be very satisfied, at least if you are going to or plan to publish through Spotify.
Yeah, and I don't know if there's a free version of Libsyn. A lot of people that I know, get into it. It's a fairly inexpensive version. Libsyn's that's what I got started on, was doing stuff on Libsyn, and it's always been a great service there. So that might be a good place to start. Learning how to roll their own RSS is probably as useful if they're in an education platform. So then there's a lot of options. Once you go down that path, they're probably, especially as they're learning. I mean, if you're in a school environment, them understanding how that process works is probably a useful thing too. And you can put it on any kind of local server at that point. It's just an RSS feed. They're not going to probably get hundreds or thousands of downloads for their very first podcast. I mean, maybe they will. I just haven't seen it that often. It takes usually a little bit of time to get a couple listeners, and so you may want to think about them building that, and publishing that to spec and learning what that process looks like. Next question.
Rick Combs is up next. Is there a piece of hardware that I can put at the end of my audio chain to delete a hum? The chain is very mixed with several XLRs, RCAs, and 1/8" jacks, so I'm not sure where the hum might be coming from. Years of others' works that he's trying to fix.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
In a word, no. You're going to need to go through the chain and fix the hum, probably by removing everything unbalanced that you possibly can. Hum is related to the frequency of power, which 60 cycles in the United States, 50 cycles per second, 50 hertz in other countries. But the problem is, so you might think I could just use a high pass filter if I don't need those frequencies. But the problem is there are also the harmonics of that. So hum often includes 120, 180 hertz and frequencies on up. So if you're going to take that out with high pass filter, you're going to take out all of the audio that you actually want. So you're going to have to go through the chain step by step.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Listen to Jeff, because he's right about all of that. I will say that there is a nuclear device. We've had them for a long time on the video side. And they're only, I'm going to preface it before I even mention it. It's only that thing where if you get into a shoot and you're running late and you connect everything and you've got a nasty 60 cycle hum, there are devices called humbuckers. That's the general colloquial term for them, that just literally filter out all of that. But it is the place of last resort, and I'm going to support what Jeff said. Find the real problem. What is it that you're getting ground potential leak into your system, and make sure that it's fixed. You want to keep using balanced cables and not unbalanced. Sometimes you can't avoid it, but keep any unbalanced runs as short as possible. And maybe search for what's causing the hum. I've seen it from fluorescent light ballasts, from motors in circumstances. All those things can cause dirty power that will result in a hum.
Good, Ronnie.
You don't mention specifically what kind of hardware or things that you have in your flow, but I would suggest the previous answers. Keep the unbalanced cables as short as possible and use high quality balanced cables where possible, and check those old mixers and those old gears that could be problematic. And as an answer to your question, there are some tricks that you can apply, and one of those are noise assist, for instance, for a MixPre, which causes you to purchase a new hardware. Or you can probably, if this is going also into computers, you can do real-time noise processing. There is a lot of good products coming out and already exist, so you can check those out as well.
Yeah, I would say that a noise assist is probably overkill, but it won't hurt you to have a MixPre somewhere in your pipeline. so you having it running it through there, if that's one problem, that's probably the heavier hit. It is it's really worth it to try to go through it. You will buy things, and then that'll put off the inevitable, which is that you really have to figure out how to get those things going. I think a humbucker can reduce it. You'll still hear it there, but it won't be probably as loud as that goes. But I think that you're going to have to tear that apart. And boy, I got to tell you, the next week and a half is the best time to do it. You probably don't have as much going on. I would get pretty aggressive about that if I had the budget to make some changes. Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
One thing to remember as you're troubleshooting any devices that can be powered off of batteries, that's a great way to test them, is to remove their AC power. Computers, MixPres, all those types of things. Test them in both situations and see if that changes the hum, and that can help maybe lead you to the place where you need to make a fix. Not saying that the power is the problem, but it will lead you to the device.
And remember that what's oftentimes happening there is it's a differential of potential between different. You have multiple circuits powering the same gear. If you unify the ground across those circuits, or unify the circuit, you may get rid of all of it. That's another thing to look at is can you how much power is all of this stuff taking, and can you get it onto a 15 amp or 20 amp circuit to have it there. This is one of the other tools as far as getting things out of computers is, of course, I talked about this earlier. This is the USB Pre 2. I've used these a lot, and usually I used to have a lot of these. I have 4 or 5 of these sitting in my case, in our larger Crikey cases, and we used to just listen for that buzz at an event and just walk down the back and just grab a DI because we knew it was around there somewhere, and just replace it with this to get rid of the buzz. Radial, Chris Sabato showed it. Radial has they have their own, the US Pro 2, which is considerably less expensive. It's at $300, $279. This is another way to get things out of computers, where it's USB in and balanced out, which I didn't know about until yesterday, and I'm excited. I'm going to try to get one. Next question.
Next one comes from Andy Kokendorfer in VR, Florida. Can you suggest a low-cost gooseneck mic for a conference room, or multiples of that? I would like to interface them with an XR18 Auto Mix for Zoom. Thanks.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Not sure what you consider low cost, but I would take a look at Shure, brand that's hard to go wrong with. The Shure MX400 series, around $200 a mic, and they come in various lengths.
Good, Ronnie.
Yeah, totally. We used MX4s 418s to get them as close as possible and have no problem. Of course, they are a little bit more expensive than really low cost, but they are really, really good sounding. Just make sure you select the right microphone capsule. They have 2 different widths. One is wider than the other. So we went with a wider one to be sure that we catched a lot of movement in the lateral direction. So make sure to check them out. They are really good.
Yeah, and the with gooseneck mics, try not to skimp too much. Like it is really pretty painful when people have really cheap ones. The sibilance is intense. That you have a problem with this in general because of just the nature of a gooseneck mic, but the sibilance becomes just this super painful process, and it gets much worse as you go down the cost structure. If you can avoid it, try to. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, another thing besides sibilance that gets bad with the inexpensive models is handling noise. That when someone's moving that gooseneck can be really annoying.
Yeah, I will say that a lot of what we used for a lot of this stuff, we started off with cheap ones, and then we moved to the Sures that were mentioned earlier, and then we moved to Microflex. And the Microflex ones for us were really, it's not the least expensive solution in that area, but I'll let you just know it's there. It's out there waiting for you. You plug them all into the charger and you hit reset, and it just all the numbers get reset. It's a Dante connection to a wireless transceiver. I think you can put up to 38 of them, into a system if you turn it into high density mode, which does affect the quality just a little bit. I wouldn't use them for TV, but if you're using them for corporate streaming, so on and so forth, there's a whole line of them. And, it's probably not the first thing you're going to buy or what you're going to buy right now. But just know that they really are kind of life-changing when it comes to changing over rooms fast and people just handing you back things and you having to figure out what it's programmed to, and it's really great. Next question.
Next one's from somebody named Alex Lindsay in Nevada, California. Alex is here, and he says, Zoom has been updated. An announcement.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
So I'm just going to say, if two things weren't true, if I knew I wasn't answering the next question, and if I didn't know it would cause the back end crew to go crazy, I'd be pushing the button right now. I'm telling you, Alex, I'd be pushing it right now.
Yeah. So this is an update. There was a little bit of a color channel issue last week. We like to call it the Smurfy edition, and so that was. But this is the update that will correct black levels. So if you're having issues, if you feel like your blacks are a little crunchy in coming out of your ATEM switcher into Zoom, this will correct those blacks. And I got to tell you, this is not just making a fine adjustment to the blacks, somewhere in the middle of the pipeline. This was a very deep engineering problem that Zoom undertook to do this, and so it looks really good, and I would highly recommend it. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Joe Phillips in Murphy, North Carolina. Chris, you inspired me to go where this geek has not gone before. My all-in M3 Max lands Friday. Congratulations. Did you migrate or reload from scratch? I'm using Loopback, Hijack, SoundDesk, Resolve Studio, Parallels, OBS, NDI, and Zoom. Thoughts?
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, Joe sent me a message. He said he got the BlackBook Pro, and I got the BlackBook Pro, except I forgot to click the checkbox that said make it black. There's a couple things. One, Alex, you mentioned something the other day about, I'm going to paraphrase a little bit harsher. You're kinder than I am. You said, essentially, it's kind of dumb to use a laptop as your primary, sorry, Bill, as your primary machine because there's some issues with it. We all know that you love your laptop. And I got to say, I have retired my iMac Pro as my primary Zoom computer, and I moved to the BlackBook Pro. And I totally agree with you, Alex. It's like, stupid lid and keyboard. It's kind of a pain. And as far as the updating, Joe, about a week ago, if you dig through the archives, you'll find me saying, I just migrate almost all the time. And although I do migrate almost all the time, on this particular instance, I decided to install from scratch. It doesn't sound like you have a whole lot to do. I would recommend, although Parallels, really? I would recommend you install from scratch. My biggest issue is I'm kind of merging two machines into one. So I had a 6-year-old laptop, oldest machine I've ever used professionally, and the iMac Pro. The iMac Pro had been my primary editor. It is no longer. And I had kind of relegated it to be my Zoom computer. And then the MacBook Pro was basically my personal computer. And I was kind of merging both of them into one. And that's why I decided to start from scratch. I have very quickly decided I'm just going to hold on to that personal thing with old personal stuff. And I'm going to keep this. Do it from scratch. Short answer, do it from scratch.
Go ahead, Ronnie.
I'll make it shorter. Do it from scratch and do it the way that I would do it. Install every updates before you start installing software and get everything running stable and good. And it will be, because it's a good machine you have purchased. Another thing, comment. I'm not sure I would add OBS or Parallels, as Mr. Fenwick said. I have had problems with OBS on Macs, even on the studio machine. So
Yeah, and
probably try Ecamm or Mimo Live or something.
Yeah, I think that and I would definitely recommend installing from scratch, as I've said in the past. I think that you, especially if you unless you have a lot of things there, there's a lot of quirkiness to people's computers, and they don't realize that a lot of that comes down to that they did a migration. So, like, there's like, oh, I don't know why it just crashed, or I don't know why something does something weird, and these are minor little issues that you just notice. They're little inconveniences. And a lot of times that's because there's some misconnected, connections. So I would highly recommend doing, building it up, at this point in the date, I would have the latest software, latest OS, put all that stuff on, get all the updates done, and then start putting things on one at a time, and then run all their updates for each one of them as you go through it. Next question.
Next one comes from David in London. I'm using 2 camcorders and 2 Canon pan-tilt zoom cameras, recording internally on the camcorders and on ATEM Extreme ISO simultaneously. I'm seeking a solution to capture the pan-tilt zoom camera feeds before they reach the ATEM. Any recommendations?
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
You didn't say whether they're HDMI or SDI. One thought is HyperDex, and another is it Atomos Ninja, little screen that'll record, gives you a local or distant view of what's on that PTZ.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt to have that little monitor behind the PTZ anyway, so that you can see what's going on without actually having to go back and look at your switch. So I would definitely look at the Atomos. Have some great ones. Blackmagic also has some field. They've got a bunch of monitors that have SD cards in them that you can record to as well. So I have a tendency to record to the HyperDex. So we'll have a whole bunch of HyperDex all lined up and hit record. It's mostly because we can centralize them. We can tell them all to record at the same time. We can do all those things that are there. So I tend to go through those, what I tend to do is do a router. So all my cameras come back to a router. The router routes out to the record and back into the switcher. That might be more than what you want to do, and it depends on whether the routers are not really advisable if you're trying to do HDMI. But if you're doing SDI, that's why a lot of us use SDI, is so we can do things like put a 20 by 20 or 40 by 40 router in the middle of it. But I think that you can also get, if you're just looking for an H.264 record like the ISO, there are these, Courtney has talked many times about these little gaming throughputs. So look for an HDMI recorder. It'll just pass through the HDMI. It's a little box. You hit record and it'll record H.264. Since you're recording H.264 everywhere else, probably wouldn't hurt you to do that. And those are like $40. So you can put those in. So that's another way to if you're just looking for a backup and you're looking for an H.264 record. Next question.
Next one comes from Danny Grizzle in Longview, Texas. Cranky Cameraman on YouTube is seeing a trend that building management in big cities are demanding $5 million liability before rolling a card in, which adds $5,000 on top of his day rate, he says. Anyone else seeing skyrocketing insurance costs?
Go ahead, Bill.
That seems a lot, $5,000, because you should be carrying, if you're doing commercial video production, you should be carrying commercial insurance and liability. Back when I was really active, I started with $1 million, moved it up to $2 million. I wouldn't be at all surprised if $5 million is the limit they're asking you for a rider. But your standard insurance policy for business, if you've got decent coverage, should be able to knock you out a certificate for that. And I don't think $5,000 for a single thing, that means that you don't have a relationship going. I would get a relationship going. And the big companies like Chubb that do this kind of insurance, that's who I had for years, they understand this, and it shouldn't be that kind of money to get yourself covered for that day.
Yeah, I don't know what it's like today to do this. And again, if you're doing this fairly regularly, you don't want to buy it for the day. You buy it for the year. I think PixelCore, I haven't had to deal with it. I haven't had to manage it personally for a long time. But PixelCore, I think we paid probably like $16,000 to $20,000 a year for our insurance, but we had $7 million of liability. We had, I think, $4 million of loss. We had, it was a fair amount of insurance. I think it was like $2 million of E&O and so errors and omissions. And so you had a bunch of, you kind of stacked up a bunch of those insurances. What I will say is a company that does it's a real luxury if you're a company that has that insurance, because you basically, that requirement weeds out most of your competition because they can't come up with the insurance. And so you just go, well, they say, because they'll ask you, oh, we're doing this thing at this hotel and they require blah, blah, blah. And you go, yeah, sure, I can send you a certificate. And not a lot of people who do what we do can. So as you grow in business, it's one of those things that kind of makes it easier for you to keep business and do those things. If you have a yearly insurance policy that does it, $5,000 for a day, it could be. I mean, the money numbers now are like funny monopoly money at this point. Like, I have no idea what's going on with pricing. So I wouldn't be surprised if it went suddenly from $800 to $5,000. There's nothing about the current costs of things that would surprise me anymore. So it could have happened. Go ahead, Chris.
We had a instance recently where one of our clients, we deal with different divisions inside the company. And one of the divisions says we needed $1 million worth of liability to set foot on their property. And we had to renew some paperwork with a different division. And they said, now you need $10 million worth of liability. And we were like, really? So we contacted our insurance agent, and they said, oh, just go back to them and negotiate. We're like, what? Yeah, just say, hey, look, I got this instead. And what was interesting is how quickly they buckled to adhere to what the other division of the company, well, these guys said I only needed $1 million. Oh, okay. I mean, literally, that's what the response was. Oh, okay. So what's interesting about these types of things and numbers and big companies is a lot of times somebody makes a policy and they just go, well, let's just make it this much.
Well, and a lot of times it's based on somebody else's, like somebody worked there and they said, this is how much we have. And they say, oh, that's a company that seems to know what they're doing. And they just base it on their what came through sometime ahead of time. And then they see a new company that came in with 10 million and they're like, oh, we should ask for 10 million. Like, and because everybody's risk adverse. I mean, what they're afraid of is you burning down their hotel, or ruining the ballroom or, everything else.
Fire extinguishers. Come on. But anyway, my point is how it was amazing how quickly they buckled. Oh, yeah. Okay.
I mean, the need for the one that's really been hard recently has been that a lot of insurance providers have dropped covering gear stolen from cars, and it's partially because in the cities the break-in rate has been so high that a lot of the insurers won't carry it anymore, and so you can't leave anything in a car ever, at any point in time. And now the crazy thing is that then the rental providers require you to have a rider that includes the car, because they don't want to give you a lens and have it stolen, and you get into this thing where you have to buy extra insurance just to cover a lens in your car. So that's it's really got the car theft in especially LA, New York, and San Francisco have really jacked the prices of rentals. I mean, of insurance up, and it may be connected to some of the things we're looking at. Next question.
Paul Wallace, Hot Springs, Arkansas. Which video editors are most compatible with YouTube, and what are the pros and cons of the YouTube native creative editing tools?
I go, Jeffrey.
So basically, most editors basically compete to have YouTube standards put into there, so it's pretty agnostic when it comes to bringing YouTube into the system there. So you edit and then you upload, and if they have YouTube settings to it, that's usually where the getcha is, and they keep those. A lot of them keep them pretty current, from Final Cut to Premiere and stuff like that. The YouTube native creative editing tools are very basic. Like, for instance, you can do jump cuts and cut out bits and pieces. You can blur things out, but you can't do both. You can put in end screens, you can put in alternate audio, but you can't do it if it's this amount old or if it's had this many views to it. So the YouTube native editor is just for basic corrections, and then bringing it into a regular editor if you need to make some big corrections, and then make sure that it's set up to do rendering to a YouTube style editor, or not editor, but YouTube style video. Otherwise, it can take forever for that video to render because YouTube has to re-render it to their standards.
Good, Ronnie.
We tend to use any editor we like. So the person is editing in his favorite tool. If it's Final Cut or DaVinci Resolve, that's up to them. But we normally export a high quality MOV file and then use a compressor or similar to encode it to YouTube standards. And that's giving us the best results.
You good, Bill?
Yeah, the big editing systems will all do anything for those kind of things. Well, I'm a little more concerned, and I'm speaking in an area I'm not that familiar with, but I keep hearing about programs like CapCut that are popular with young online editors, but have not come out of like the motion picture thing. So my concern is just that I'm not sure how much tool they have for growing you into something above that if you want to, and I'm using above in quotes. All the big ones will do the simpler work very easily. I would be concerned that maybe, and I'm not sure about this, but maybe the simpler ones do not migrate up. And if you have a very complicated documentary and you've learned on another tool, that may be a problem for you in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, I think that from native creators that are building this stuff, the thing we have to remember is that a lot of us get started and you get 50 views and 100 views and 300 views or whatever, and they're just putting out a lot of content. And I will say that I was surprised at I was just at a creator event, and I was surprised at how many people were using CapCut for what they were doing, because it allows them to export to the native platform. It builds it towards that native platform. They're able to turn it over fast, and so and again, with success comes more infrastructure and editors and everything else. You talk to larger creators and they have their own they have a team of it. I was talking to one creator they have 8 editors, and they're looking, or 6 editors. They're looking for 2 more, and so I think that it really depends on I think it depends on it, but I think that I see CapCut a lot. If I was going to do stuff, I'd probably do most of my stuff, and I'd be tempted to use Final Cut. If I was looking for long term and I want to be able to absolutely do anything, including high level color and surrounds and everything else, then I'd use Resolve. But don't ever. Well, I don't know. You can do whatever you want. I never, ever, ever, never export anything other than ProRes out of my programs, and then I compress it. And because it can crash in the middle, it takes a long time, and you have to do it again. There's a 1,000 reasons to just record or to export ProRes. Next question.
Next question from Guy Cochran in Seattle, Washington. Guy says, what do you need to rent a high-end camera from a rental shop? Anything else to know ahead of time?
Good, Chris?
Insurance, and a certificate of insurance. And I will tell you, having friends that have run high-end camera rental places, they like to know the people that they're doing business with. It pays to call them, maybe even drop by, develop a relationship, take them out to lunch, ask their advice. These people really know their gear, and they'll steer you the right direction. But having a relationship with those people, instead of just like walking in and throwing down your credit card and walking out, it goes a long way.
And it depends on the rental company too. Sometimes you know them, sometimes you don't. But there's a rental in San Francisco, VideoFax, and Lee or Mona will pick up the phone, and you'll be sitting there and you'll spend the first 5 or 10 minutes like talking about how things are going, how things go. Did you get any new cameras? And they're just the best. And the thing is, I was talking to, there was one where I was trying to get this weird cable for my Scorpio. This is actually for last NAB. I was trying to get this weird cable that's that has that splits things out and everything else. And they didn't have it, and they were like, "Hey, but I think that Frank, do you have one of those at your house?" And I'm like. He's like, yeah. He goes, yeah, I just rent you one, but those are the kind of things that happen, as Chris said, in those conversations. That doesn't happen when you're being transactional. It happens when you're being relational. And, there is a lot of room for adjustments and flexibility at rental houses. And so you're either going to get retail or you're going to get, a better deal, or they're going to ping you. Like we had a rep at VER that's now not VER, it's something else, PRG. But we had a rep at VER that when new stuff came in, or when they knew that these are the kind of lenses we do, like, hey, we just want you to know we got the lenses back, or there's a 50 to 1,000 there, and you get into this thing. But that came from just hanging out and having conversations, as Chris said, with them and talking about what you do and how you do it. And it also meant that we rented more from the rental companies that are conversational. We rent from, because you can call them and go, I'm trying to figure this out. And they'll just, this
They'll
is what
work
you
the
need.
problem with you. Yeah.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
this good friend of mine who just recently retired, he ran his camera rental business out of his home in Foster City for decades. Okay, like 40 years.
VideoFax was out of Lee's garage in Richmond. Or whatever,
anybody who knew
Cold.
Jeff Regan, and rented from Jeff Regan, we all knew the code to get into his house, because the way you pick up gear is you swing by his house, you enter in the code. In the old days, before he got married, it would take you into his front hall.
Yeah.
His whole living room was shelves of gear, and there'd be a taped off section on the floor in the front hall. Here's Fenwick's stuff, and you'd pick up your stuff and you'd sign the paperwork and you'd leave. Jeff would be upstairs asleep in his bed.
Good
He'd
business.
check the video camera going, oh, that's Fenwick, that's okay. And he'd go back to sleep.
Yeah.
Then once he got married and he had to downsize and take his 2 Ferraris and stack them in the garage so he had room for the gear.
Evidently, the business model was working.
It
Not
worked
a lot of
fine. I just found out recently, Jeff's only like a couple years older than me, and he just retired. I'm so jealous. But yeah, eventually it moved to his garage, but you just dial in the code.
And it
there's
really
your gear.
is. There's one, I won't mention their name because, but there's one rental house that rents a lot of lenses in the Bay Area. And man, they just treat me like not good. Like no matter what we do,
327.
They treat my brother so well, and I'm like, we have the same last name, because he spends so much time down there, getting lenses and cameras and stuff like that, and he's hanging out with them all the time. They treat him like royalty. And they love working with them. And so I had one problem where we were doing this shoot last year, and I couldn't get it to work. And I was like, "Can you just call? Can you just call?" He called him, and it was like, boom, it was done. But I was like, I know you don't know me because I don't rent as much as I used to. But I mean, we have the same last name. Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
So what you're hearing is relationship, and it goes across this entire business. I mean, you think you're trying to figure out who the best rental houses are. The rental houses at the same time are trying to figure out who the best practitioners are, and they understand intuitively that if they make these relationships strong and last for a long time, you'll keep coming back. And so it's a beautiful thing. My pro tip for you, though, is that you don't have to be in Los Angeles or San Francisco or New York or something like that to get this. Even the big kind of commercial rental places, Lens Rentals and others like that, if you do enough business with them, and sometimes I would actually, when I was doing C500s for shoots for a while, I would rent them from there because of 2 reasons. Number one, they know how to pack and ship stuff. They do it every single day, and it always gets there on time, and they're building their business based on that. Yes, I was paying a little more money from it, but the thing was I could get them to ship it literally anywhere, and when I called, I got to Jane, and Jane knew me and said, yeah, I will take care of that for you, and had you think about this? I'm hearing from people that you really are burning up batteries. I'm going to put a couple of extra batteries in there just in case it's a problem. That's the kind of thing that makes you stand out from everybody else, and it says that you're renting a lot, you're paying your bills, we want to keep you around, and you can be anywhere and establish that kind of relationship.
I rent this one camera that's really hard to rent. It's a Canon ME20. It's a super low light camera, and really Borrow Lenses is the only place to rent it from. No one else really carries it. And I'd rented a couple times, and then I got this thing where they hit me up. I was trying to do it right at the last minute to rent it for something that I needed. And I probably am the only person renting that camera regularly. And anyway, so they sent me one of those, like they need my certificate of insurance, and I was having trouble getting it. And I was like, oh, and then I got this thing like the next day, oh, we'll just pass on it. Because they had seen I had rented it over and over and over again. They weren't as worried that I was not going to bring it back. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times we do things where we just barter out with people. It's like, I'll get you on the next one. Don't worry about it. I don't feel like doing the paperwork right now. Alex, you've made a comment in the past about crews on site that you don't like when people get too just chatty. Like talking about stuff that's not the job.
it distracts them. So I don't mind. So usually what happens is we look for opportunities at lunch. We go out and have dinner afterwards. There's lots of things we do that we're mixing and matching. And I don't mind people talking about the gear with each other, like chit-chatting about like this camera or whatever. But when someone starts talking about politics, when politics is like the third rail, like we have people come in, they're talking about politics, and that is the third rail. Like, I'll never put you on a team again because it polarizes my team. Like, a team will make a whole bunch of decisions about what things are, and so that's the one you don't do ever. But the main thing is, people talking about cars, or they're talking about their dinner last night or whatever. It distracts people from getting things done, and things get missed. And so talking about the gear and the process is fine. And I look for opportunities because I look for opportunities to be social because I'm trying to measure people up for my next job. That's the thing about producers, is they're always looking. Every new person, they're looking at you. Like, I don't think that people realize that that's what's happening. But producers, the amazing thing about production is that you don't have a lot of employees, and you're making decisions between every show. Who do you get rid of and who do you add to your crew, to your posse? And you're constantly making those decisions. And the great producers, what they have is a Rolodex of all the people that you can trust.
A deep Rolodex.
A deep Rolodex of people that you can trust. And they know who to call. And that's what makes the difference in a lot of these shows, especially when things go wrong. Anyway.
I didn't mean to raise your blood pressure. What I was trying to say was
still down there.
And don't worry about it, Alex. I'm going to pray for you and that idiot you voted for. No,
I didn't vote for him.
I'm just saying I'm mixing two third rails. What I was saying is, what you want to be able to do. I'm just kidding. What you want to be able to do is to have a relationship with those rental houses where you can just say, "Hey, I'm in the area. Yeah. You want to grab lunch?"
Yeah. And just to go back to answering the guy's question, get at least a week ahead of time. Get a hold of your rental companies. Get your paperwork into them. Know where you're going to get your insurance. Know how long it takes your insurance company to get a certificate of insurance, a COI. Make sure that you know what those processes are, so that you don't have any surprises. When we go into a new city that I haven't worked in with PixelCore, we would send someone out, and they would set up relationships and building relationships with all the paperwork that needed to be done with 3 rental companies in every new city. Like, I'm going to Charlotte, and they would find the rental companies, and then they would just do the paperwork. It's free, typically, to do that paperwork, and now you're in the system, and you do it, and even if you don't use it, you just have it there now. And so anytime we went to a new place, we didn't want to be trying to figure that out. Next question.
John Maruka, in Raleigh, North Carolina, says, is anyone familiar with the Shure MXA 710 overhead mics? My contractor wants to install these in our new large conference room, but wants to hang them directly under the projectors. I can't imagine that they can reject the noise from the projectors.
Good, Ronnie.
They can. They are exceptionally good, but it depends on the noise level of the projector, of course. If it's a big laser projector throwing out thousands and thousands of lumens, I would be a little bit reluctant. I haven't played with the 7 series. I have done some work on the 9 series, which is impressive. But beware that these microphones has to be fixed in the position, or the lobes of the microphones has to be fixed from Shure. But if you're going to the ones that is called Team Connect from Sennheiser, Sennheiser's software is more organic and will adjust itself to the persons when they are moving around the tables.
And you probably can't do anything about this right now, but when you talk to contractors and integrators, you want to ask how much production they actually do. You want to know, like, what productions do they actually work on. The real problem with integrators is they come up with ideas that make sense in their head, but they've never actually done it. And so they build crazy ideas that don't really work. And that's how we end up with all these conference rooms that don't work, is because the contractors didn't actually have to do anything in them. What's really going to make these mics work or not are your walls. So the walls, how soft or hard the walls are, is going to make a huge difference in how effective these mics are, because they're already challenged by physics. They're going to be 3 to 4 feet, maybe 5 or 6 feet away from the subjects. And so the physics problem is going to be the bigger problem than the fans. And because those are probably pretty constant, it's going to be how many glass walls do you have and how many whiteboards do you have on there? That's really going to make a big difference in how these perform. Go ahead, Ronnie.
Yeah, and exactly that's the reason why you should think of using gooseneck microphones instead. They are much better.
You know, I talked about this in the past, but we had a partner that they took these little Shure Wireless, some of these Microflexes, and they put them in everybody's pocket. And it was just, they just hand them to you, and people just got used to wearing shirts with pockets, and they just drop them in because they had built a conference room that was all glass. All four walls were glass, and they couldn't find something else to work. And they finally found these ones they could just drop into everybody's pocket, and it all sounded great. And because I could, when I saw it, I'd been on conference calls with them. I'm like, you have these conference calls in here? And they're like, oh yeah, all the time, but you have to use these, And because I was like, we can't shoot in here, and they're like, oh, we do conferences all the time. I'm like, yeah, I know, but I'm not going to use those mics, and like I can't shoot in here. It's just too echoey, And so, but the walls make a huge difference. What contractors should be talking about are great walls, and all the mics work. Next question.
Next one comes from Vic Hernandez in Springfield, Missouri. Is the Shure MV7 still the mic of choice for sending out a kit?
Go ahead, Ronnie.
Yeah, we use them a lot. We have 4 of them out as we speak. Just make sure that you are choosing the right one if you're purchasing new ones. I made a mistake of purchasing a cheap MV7, and it ended up being a MV7X, which didn't include the USB interface. So learning by doing.
Yeah, we're sending the MV7s out. I'm thinking of actually moving to the MV7X and then using the Shure X2U, the new X2U, because the MV7s haven't ever moved past the micro USB. And when you send them out over and over again, that micro USB tends to start to get loose, and we're having connection issues with some of the older ones. So we're strongly thinking about moving away from the dual purpose ones, just because now if they move to USB-C, we'd be fine. And the X2U, of course, is USB-C. So anyway, go ahead, Jeffrey.
So I'm not a fan of any type of microphone that's not on the body when it comes to a remote kit, because you don't know the room, you don't know how they're setting everything up. I like the lavs, I like the headset microphones because you put it onto the person. If you're bringing it with a remote kit, you have to take the MV7. You also have to bring a stand. You don't know what type of table they're setting on. You don't know where you're going to end up putting the microphone. And then once again, the room's going to be a big factor as to, because the microphone could be right here. The microphone could be way over there. And you're just trying to do the elephant explanation as to where to put a microphone. And that just takes up a lot of time. So I like to use lavs and headsets for stuff, especially for people I don't know.
Yeah, I think that I think for video, I think you're 100% right. Those work really well, especially the lavs. I don't like the sound of lavs, and so I tend to not use them. And then the headsets, the headsets are great when they do them correctly. But we found that we were having as much trouble. The reason we moved from we have a lot of headsets. We never had lab. I haven't bought labs in 10 years, but we had headsets. And the problem we had is that people don't get them just right, and then they're too far ahead, they're too far behind, they're scratching against their face. And there's a lot of women that do not like to put them on because they have long hair, and getting the headsets around it. If you do a one ear, they're just swinging all over the place. You do a 2 ear, and it's a half an hour to get it underneath what they, whatever their style is. And so that's been the problem with them. But we were very heavy on the headset mics for a couple of years, and then we just finally gave up and went back to the MV7s and those types of things, because the real problem with the labs is, again, if they have a hard room, you're going to pay for it, because the labs are challenged by physics. Next question.
Roscoe Jones, Madison, Indiana, found a place with many in-ear mixes. What can we learn by listening to someone's in-ear mix? And he's got a YouTube link there.
Go ahead, Jeff.
What Roscoe was talking about is the mixes that individual musicians in a band performing here, and I love to kind of peek around and see. You get a very different mix for a vocalist who's going to need to hear, the harmonic structure to be in tune. They're going to need to hear themselves, as opposed to a guitar player who may want to hear themselves at the front of the mix, and a drummer who will probably need to hear lots of click. It's interesting to hear the cues that go on that may be pre-programmed into the tracks. So there'll be like a 3, 2, 1 chorus countdown, so that everyone is in the same spot in the song, because the tracks don't adjust to the performers. You need to adjust to them. The ones I really love to listen to are sort of complex polyrhythm, sort of mathcore music, because oftentimes there'll be different click tracks for the drummer and the guitar player because they're playing polyrhythms. And I always wonder, how do they do this? Well, they're doing it because they're listening to their own clicks.
That was Stuart Copeland, by the way, has a great explanation of polyrhythms. And it's just watching him build it up. He goes, well, you're doing two different things at the same time. And he just does it. And it's pretty awesome. Yeah, go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, that's some great stuff from Stuart Copeland. For me, looking at the video, basically you have him playing guitar. He has a microphone, and we don't know if I don't know if he sings, so I don't know what his mic mix versus his guitar mix is going to be in there. For me, that just having one instrument inside of there is not working for me because I'm behind the drums and I can barely hear the guitars. I can barely hear the bass or the vocals when I'm behind the drum kit, and that's the same thing here. If that drummer would have been an electronic kit, you would have heard the electronic kit probably in the ears. If they would have done direct outs instead of amps on stage, which is my guess, he probably would have had some of that into the mix. So it really depends on who it is, and it also depends on what they've got on stage. Because if the sound is low on stage, then you're definitely going to need to have something in your ears. And most likely the guitar will be the dominant thing out of everything because that's what he really does need to hear.
Go ahead, Chris.
What's interesting about this recording is I know this band. I've listened to this band a lot, and I've never heard this guy in the show mixes. Never heard any of the nuance and subtlety that he's playing. And in terms of doing mixes, I've mixed a lot of monitors. There's two things you got to do. You got to be reason. You got to think through like, well, this guy's probably going to need this, but you also have to know that person's personality, and it comes with time. And that's why a lot of times a monitor mix position is adjacent to the stage because you're working with somebody you've never met before, and they really just need to be able to communicate with you. And sometimes it's just looking over at you, going, and so you're going to find out what that person wants to hear. There's some general things. This is a nice mix. This guy has some really great guitar bits that I have never heard listening to this band. It's a shame.
It's funny, we try to really customize those. So a lot of times either our A1 or we actually have somebody who will just be managing the in-ears for that process. And so they're sitting there constantly. The band will just say, give me a little bit more of this, or I need a little bit more of that. And they just sit there and tweak it. I talked to my daughter. She's like, I have my own personal mixer right in front of me. That's what I want. So then I can sit there and tweak what I want. And so it's I was like, but what about the service? She's like, no, I just want to be able to tweak it. I don't want to ask anybody. So it's an interesting, it's a very personal thing for everybody about how they want to do it. Go ahead, Jeff.
Back to the polyrhythm thing, I threw a Instagram reel in the Meccano chat. Ty Visor is a drummer who puts up a graphic that has, a triangle, a square, a hexagon circling around as he's playing. So it's a really great visual for looking at polyrhythms.
Next question.
Guy Cochran, Seattle, Washington. Did Zoom quietly release a new iOS build of their mobile app that allows for USB UVC webcam input?
All I can say is that the guy threw a Cochrane and then he's not here. Like, I don't know. So anyway, yes. So
it's a disconnected
maybe
Cochrane.
They did. The Cochrane was off the field. So I don't know if they did that or not. It sounds like because he asked that they may have put in something that will now see the USB the UVC webcams directly into Zoom, which would be amazing. So hopefully that is the case. A lot of updates recently. Yeah, go ahead, Ronnie.
I'm updating as we speak, so I'll guess we'll know that later for sure.
Yeah, we'll give it, Ronnie. Just raise your hand on something. You can just randomly tell us as it goes through there. Next question.
Henry Ramos, Yonkers, New York. Anyone still using TeamViewer? Yesterday, I found my version wouldn't connect while Zoom is running. Can't update since the client's machine can't be updated.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I just ran it and it works perfectly. I have a machine that's set up so when I'm out of the house that I can connect up to that machine so I can do some basic things. And yeah, I just ran it. No problem there.
It's funny. All we used was TeamViewer maybe 5 years ago, and they changed the pricing, and almost nobody I know uses it anymore. But it sounds like if it works for you, it's great. Next question.
Paul Wallace, Hot Springs, Arkansas. The new Parallels Desktop 19 for Mac is $99 a year, but where do you get a copy of Windows 11 to run on it, and what's the cost?
I go, Jeffrey.
Depends on how you're going to use it. I know many people that run Parallels and they run Windows 11, but they don't put a license on it because you can run it. You just don't get certain features like you have a watermarked background with saying that this is not a licensed copy. But of course, a lot of people need to spin up a Windows 11 session just to test out something, and they basically trash it after that. So you can get a license almost anywhere. You could get an OEM license, which is going to be cheaper, but you're going to get absolutely no support for it. And then, of course, you can go through some backdoor dealings. I'm not going to talk about that. But the whole point is that you can run it without a license if you're just using it for testing out, and then you're just going to throw it away afterwards.
Next question.
Guy Cochran, Seattle, Washington. What might be of interest at CES, the big consumer electronics show that happens in January?
I think I mentioned this earlier. They kind of raised the bump of what it took to get in as a press pass, and then I just stopped listening. I was like, it stopped existing for me. So I'm not looking. I stopped thinking about CES. So I haven't been thinking about what might be there. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So Canon's going to be talking about their cameras. LG's got they got some new monitors. I just reported on this, dual switched hertz monitor for gamers, so it can go up to 480 FHz. I always get that acronym wrong, but you also have 240 hertz up to 480 hertz, and depending on if you're playing a game versus watching a movie, it'll switch them back and forth to save on power. There's going to be a lot of AI. Last year was, I call it the introduction of AI to the consumer market, and this year is the deep dive of AI, what can really be done. And I'm also going to expect a lot of companies that say we've got AI, but you look at the system and it's like, no, that's not really AI that you're running there. That's something else. But other than that, a lot of the regular stuff. And of course, if anybody wants me to visit, I'll be there. So if anybody wants me to visit a booth, just have to message me, and I'll put it on my list.
I saw Linus Tech Tips was showing a TCL monitor that was 115 inches with 5,000 nits of brightness, but they can't bring it to the United States because they're stepping on LG's patent. Next question.
Matt Halverson in Brookings, South Dakota says, in Premiere Pro, when I'm editing audio, I add a single band compressor, parametric EQ, and hard limiter in that order. I set the hard limiter to -3 dB, and the audio will limit at -6 dB. I have it set at 0.1 to have it limit at 3 dB. Why?
I go, Jeff.
When I first read this, I was thinking this was a timing issue because the time constraints, the attack and release times of Dynamics processors will affect how much compression and limiting is going on. But that would go in the other direction. So looking at this, I'm wondering if you have a mono channel with this limiter on it, and you're looking at a stereo meter, in which case you're seeing the 3 dB pan law, because this is pan center. And so the channel is limited to -3, and then it goes through the pan, and so it gets to both the left and the right bus at -6. That would be my guess.
Next question.
Dick Brewer, GT, Guatemala, relating previously reinstalling from scratch question. How do you transfer your application's settings? Any customization? Do you screen print each page of your settings to tweak each application, or use settings migration technique?
I never use setting migration. I literally just install everything one at a time. The things that I want. The only thing that I don't do one at a time is I open up my my apps on my Mac, and I hit install, like all, it just moves everything that I have on my Mac, because it's just reinstalling all the little apps. And then the big apps I do one at a time. And otherwise I don't reinstall things until I need them, and that way I'm not also installing a bunch of stuff, except for the little apps. I don't mind having them all in there. But the big apps, I'd prefer not to put them on unless I actually run into them. Next question.
Craig McFarland in Boston, Mass. has a quick tip for us on the Zoom update for Mac. I had to check updates twice, once to update to 5.17, the Blue Edition, and again to get 5.17.1. Now it's all good.
Oh, yeah. But you should be able to go to 5.17.1 now directly. I'm not sure why you would need to, to go through that. But yeah. Anyway, I would highly recommend it if you're using an ATEM switcher, especially. It's probably a lot of other little updates as well. I will be talking about what we're going to talk about next year in just a moment. But just a quick reminder, of course, is that we'll be doing this all week. It's super important to have your input. So we don't take these lightly. When we're doing these, we're going to talk about what we liked in the past and what we want to see in the future. I'll talk a little bit about the format so you understand like what we're what we're doing there. But I think that it's really important to get your feedback on the kinds of things you want to see in the audio day over next year, and I'll kind of set some framing up for that. But it's really, really important. Quick reminder, or also a note, that we will be putting out some announcements. I'm going to be doing there's a Square TV lab at 10 in after hours. I'm going to be hanging out with Oliver Breidenbach at noon to talk about some Memo Live stuff, and Tlaloc and Andy may be hanging out a little bit later. So watch Discord. And welcome back to the second hour, where we talk about the second hour and what we're going to talk about in the second hour. There's so many talking in second hours there. So we, one of the things we want to do at the end of the year, about once every 3 or 4 months, we go, okay, what do we want to see? Because things change and we've seen some more things and so on and so forth. But at the end of the year, we'd like to really think about what do we want to, what did we like from last year? And we're going to give you a little cheat sheet here in just a second. And then also, what do we want to see in the future? So if you throw things in here right now, we're taking notes. I take copious notes during this, and sometimes you'll hear me typing while we're going. But I take notes on like all the suggestions, and I recommend or hope that some of the folks in the panel, raise your hand for the discussion and let us know what you liked and didn't like, and what you'd like to see more of. Not what you didn't like, but what you liked and what you'd like to see more of as we go down that path. So, but it's really, really important to throw these in because it really does help us a lot. We have councils that meet. You probably don't know this if you're watching, but we have a council that meets every week for Wednesday that talks about what we're going to talk about, and has to figure all of those things out. And these notes are the cheat sheet. And so, some people asked for this, or they said they like this. The other place you can go, of course, anytime, if it's not this time, is also going to, if you go to second hour suggestions inside of Discord, you can always throw those in as well. And we pay attention. It's one of they're near the top because I read it a lot. So it's definitely important to throw them in there. If you're not in Makana, you can use askofficehours.global. Just throw suggestions in, so you don't have to treat them like questions. If you're Makana or if you're in askofficehours.global, just put those put your comments in about what you liked and didn't like. So now what we're going to do is we're going to just take a quick moment to show you a list, basically to try to jog your memory of what we did over the last year, what we covered over the last year. Is kind of amazing, to be honest. But what we covered, and try to write down or type the ones that you're like, oh, right, I love that one. Let us know what those are, and let's go ahead and roll the video.
Audio Mixer Fundamentals. John Tatoulis, Gary Trenda of Sound Devices, Paul Selker of Spark Street Digital, Ruthless Reviews Audio, Audio Pathology, MIDI programmer Simon Passmore, Psychoacoustics with Jeff Francis, Surround Sound Basics and History, Recording Podcasts, Dr. Michael Santucci of Sensophonics, Cheryl Ottenritter at Otthouse Audio, Glenn Sanders of Zaxcom, NAB Audio, Audio at NAB, Ambisonics, Kilohertz Phase Plant, Acoustic Measurements with Michael Curtis, Digital Audio Basics, Elk Live, Gain Staging, Audio Kit, King of FM with Matthew Fetcher, Comms Architecture, Demystifying the Microphone, Prosacoustics Panels, High-End Audio Interfaces, Game Sound with Rob Bridget, Recording, Mixing and Mastering, Carl Winkler Lectrosonics, Live Audio Preparation, Object-Based Mixing with Robert Scoville, David Schumann Mixing Station, Ambisonic Plus Host Audio Pipeline, Gray Matter Audio Pipeline, Equalization Basics, CalRec Type R remote production console, practical EQ, live acoustics in historical spaces, how to choose a mixer, Lab Korg Nano Control 2, Lab Korg Nano Control 2 Part 2, Lab MixPre 3, Dynamics Basics, recording a podcast, Lab X32, Audioscopes.
That's a lot of ground. So
Yeah.
so a lot of you don't think about it until you see it over a whole year, and you just realize we did a lot of great talks. So so our hope is to do that more. And I thought that this is not the final format for all of these, but to give you a sense of kind of how we're looking at the year. I thought I'd show you the format and I posted this inside of the council area as well as I think inside Second Hours, just so you can download that PDF and take a look at it again. The councils have, and this will change by the quarter, and the councils still have some input that they need to do to finalize it. But to give you a sense of just the thought process behind these, this is what. Let's see if I can. Sorry, I'm having a little technical error here. It'll be just there. So if you look at this is kind of the way that we're looking at this process, and this keeps evolving as we work. The problem is that we have essentially we have 260 days that we have to think about any given time. So you have a format. So we have the 5 days that are here. So you have business, graphics, sound, video, and infrastructure. Infinite infrastructure. So what we then inside of that, we start to break down, what we're doing in each one of these. And so we want to have it set up so that it's easy to remember over time. So you have your first week, second week, third week, fourth week. January happens to be perfect because it starts on a first. And the first week will be a little bit different here for January. But as you think about this format, what we're looking at here is that you have these different subjects. And so the idea is that we kind of move back and forth between luminary, basic, vendor, and subject. And then across here, we want this to be as best we can. And there's obviously going to be some doubles here and there. But we want as best we can to have it have some variety. The thing that we're adding this year is these sections, which is that as we look at this, we're looking for a luminary that's general or a creator or someone looking into the future. These may change a little bit, but it gives you a sense of it. And then for each one of these, we kind of are thinking about these individual verticals that will rotate over. That way we get to everything. We're not getting into a 2D rut or a 3D rut or an AR, VR rut as we kind of work through these. Then we have wild cards. These are days that don't fit into 20 windows, and so so those are there. So if you think about, and then what happens is we slowly move through these, and so if you see, these are all shifting, based on that. They're all kind of moving along, so that we're kind of slowly moving through all of those things. And what this allows us to do is, I can tell you that in November, on the third Wednesday, I'm looking for a creative thing for sound, like something that not be a band or someone talking about their creation process. But I can tell you also that on the third, and we did last year, we kind of adjusted it for the month. This year, we're simply making sure that it's the first, what is the first Monday? What is the second Monday? And we just shift everything to make that available. That does mean that sometimes you'll see things that are together, but that I decided that was going to be okay. So anyway, that allows us to schedule way out. So what happens is we can start to think about what we want to do and how we want to do it in a I can really get we can be detailed as far as how far out we go to make that actually happen. And so when you think about those, we're trying to really build this format. By building this and by taking your suggestions as our producers, it really helps us try to fill this out. It turns out this is I think that it's kind of invisible to you, these second hours. They may seem kind of whimsical. There's an enormous amount of work that's done on the back end. Every time we have a guest, know that there's probably an average of 1 to 2 hours spent getting that guest ready to be on the show. And some are longer, some are shorter, but those are the kind of things that are being done. There's a council that's talking about these, and we're hashing out what we're going to put in. There's members of the councils that are out reaching out to people and bringing people in, and so on and so forth. And so it's a really it's an amazing lift by a lot of folks on the back end to make this happen. But what really makes it much easier and much more enjoyable for us is to get your suggestions, and that's why we're doing these hours. So let us know what the events that you liked, and also throw up suggestions that you think you'd like to see more of. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I just wanted to make a note that I am always gobsmacked on Wednesdays when I come here at the level of the people who show up to help. Jeff and Andy are here today, but Marty also, just the people who come and give their information for free. And all the years of my producing kind of content, the most questions I got, particularly when I was writing the column for Videomaker, audio seems to be the most difficult for the average layperson to get their head around when they're coming into this. Unlike video, where you can see problems, training yourself to hear issues and things like that really escapes a lot of people. So I just wanted to say a huge thank you to the three of them, plus everybody else. There are more that I'm not mentioning, who come here and help people come up. I don't think there's a better resource on the web for somebody who doesn't understand how audio works, not just in relation to video, but just in general, who wouldn't have benefited tremendously from the expertise that we have been so generously given. So thank you guys and everybody else in the background who aren't here today who have helped people understand this. It's a huge public service, and I just really think you guys have been great.
Let's jump into the first suggestions. And again, if you have suggestions, go ahead and throw those in. Let's go to the first one.
Dave Troutman, Edmonton, Canada. I was shocked by how much I learned about hearing from Jeff's psychoacoustics episode. I'd like to see more about that next year.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Dave, thank you. And I'm always shocked by how much I learned by talking about it. Every time I talk about it, I think I understand just a little bit more. So there's plenty more depth there to think about how we hear. I love to talk about how music goes together. So lots of things we can mine there.
That's great. Yeah, I think that I often talk about how important it is to do things, but I also think being able to back up and talk about how they work and then having that in the back of your head while you're doing them is super important. And I found that episode really fascinating. I can't wait to do more of those. Go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, and it's such a multifaceted topic. It's one of my favorite because what applies to studio music recording, for example, in that controlled environment, and what you do live with a live PA system psychoacoustically for your audience is different. And there's some things that are in common. There's some things that are different, and the tricks of the trade are not always obvious. So thank you for that episode.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go to the next suggestion.
Vic Hernandez in Springfield, Missouri. How about addressing audio management for outdoor events?
Yeah, there's probably a couple there. Go ahead, Jeff.
I mean, just talking about handling wind in microphones is a deep topic. From capturing, so location sound, just trying to get dialogue, and then trying to amplify that. Or recording outside. I haven't done a lot of recording outside, and the few that I've done have been definitely a challenge, not just for wind, but traffic noise and trains and other things like that.
Yeah,
I once recorded a marching band that was built, the practice field was on a train track.
Oh, no.
So when the freight train came through, there was a 15-minute break.
I have to admit that as a producer, just as live, they're like, "Why don't we do this live show outside?" And I'm like, "How about we don't?" And usually my response is always like, "No," like because I feel like we're going to invest a lot of money, but when it works, it's very magical when you can be out somewhere doing those things. But yeah, the audio is definitely a thing. Go ahead, Andy.
When I first read this question, I thought it was about managing the crew, the audio crew. That's what popped into my mind first. But actually, there's a holistic way to look at this too, which is what's your order of operations that's going to get you what you want, and that involves managing the crew, what do you do first, what do you do second, what do you do third, and how that can translate into the audience experience at the very end of that chain. So that's a good one to address because it is very
And it'd be fun to build on that, like just concert audio. We've had a little bit of that so far, but I think getting someone from Claire or someone else like that in to answer questions and talk about at scale, like what does it take to actually figure out the audio there would be kind of fun.
Robert Scoville is your ace in the hole here. He's one of my heroes. Amazing guy.
Absolutely, go Bill.
Two words: flight paths. And I say that only because I was in a mixer for the holiday season, and they had it at a place called Liberty Station, which is an old military base that is now a really lovely thing, but it's right in the San Diego airport. I don't know whether it's takeoff and landing, but literally every 10 minutes, the entire conversation on the outdoor patio had to stop. And I thought, oh my God, I'm so glad I'm not shooting here. But we've all run into that where you're somewhere too close to a flight path and it just drives you nuts.
Next suggestion.
Tommy Shantz, St. Paul, Minnesota. I would like to prioritize having global files available for teams to call and switch for training and practice, music, live concerts, theater, and so forth. Yeah,
we're definitely talking about that. So one of the things that we're working, one of the things we're working on pretty hard is figuring out how do we do concerts or corporate events and everything else where you get to listen to the comms and you get all the variety of things that we can loop so that you can kind of play with it. And we're figuring what that's going to look like, so definitely stay tuned for more of that. But I think that also we can definitely talk about those things. But I think we're looking at executing some of those. Next comment.
Robert Sababity.
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I was going to say, without revealing too much, I know somebody who recently has periodically they'll open up a Zoom room where there are people doing I'm just going to say a major sporting event. And it allows people to listen in on the comms while they're faxing the facility. And it's super interesting. It brings back a lot of bad memories, but it's super interesting to listen to the whole process and being able to give that to people. It's quite educational.
Next suggestion.
Robert Sababity in Poland. I really learned a lot about acoustics. Would like to see more on how to adjust audio equipment in conference rooms and conference centers.
Go ahead, Andy.
I'm still learning about this as well. There are people who are experts at this, and we had Michael Curtis on, who was new to me. I thought he gave a great presentation. It made me want to dig into his website, see what he had to offer. People like him. There's another guy named Nathan Lively, some of us know, who does something similar in terms of training for acoustics and how to tweak your systems and optimize them for a space. And a lot of this goes back also to order of operations because we can learn this stuff, but how much time you have on the job to really execute it is not always there. Like, if you have all the time in the world, sure. But if you don't, then what do you do? And that's another thing we can learn from people like Michael Curtis and Nathan Lively. And Pete Wojcicka would be another one because he's doing some high-level stuff out in the field as well. There's plenty of resources here within office hours to learn more about that.
Go ahead, Jeff.
And it'd be great to see this in a lab format, but the logistics of that, we've talked about it a little bit on the council. It's tough to secure a space and then to somehow convey the audio of that space, not just the feed out of the mixer, but what's actually happening in the room. And then as the problems are gone through, tuning the room, tweaking the sound system, looking at reflections, that kind of thing. So we're still working on that, and I'd love to see that come to fruition. But that's a big one. So if anyone has ideas or has a room that they'd like to give us for a while, that'd be awesome.
Good, Ronnie.
Yeah, and also maybe differentiate between the mobile audio setup and installed audio. They are vastly different, even if the acoustics is for the both of them. So here in office hours, we have a lot of both installed, and maybe some of us have mobile setups. Like this room here is mostly consisting of mobile things. but I would probably also need to know a lot of things about installation audio as well. And maybe there are some big show floors, at least in Europe, that focuses on installed audio as well, or installations as a whole.
Next comment.
Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana. What do we call it when a guest stays for after hours? Last week's after hours was great, listening to the Andes and others talk audio. How do we make that happen more often?
Yeah, so we're pretty careful about not asking for that for a lot of external folks unless they kind of know our system and are part of that. And the reason mostly is that we just don't want to add more to the day. We're happy to have them there. So it's something that we can discuss. The problem is that we're trying to fill 260 spots. What we don't want to do is make it harder by people going, oh, now I have this other, it's already like we're already want to do a tech check with them. And then we want them to show up a half an hour early, and they're used to going to every Zoom event like a minute before they need to talk. And so we're already asking for more time. And so we're a little careful about not asking for too much time. So that's the sensitivity that we have in asking, especially external guests. Andy was very flexible, but he kind of knows the community a little bit. But we don't want to. The thing we definitely don't want to do is ask them to do it right at the end of a show, because it kind of puts them in this weird space of having to say no or say yes and kind of not being ready for that. And so we want to make sure that it's we do want to do more of those things. We're kind of thinking more in a progression over time of an intro video that might come out a week or two beforehand for every show, eventually for every show, when we have a team that's willing to do that. But a little intro video, and that intro video might be an explanation if it's a basic or a subject, or literally like a little 5-minute roundtable of what we're going to talk about, like interviewing somebody a little bit just to get started on like, hey, we're going to jump on, like when we do the tech check, like let's just ask you what you do and put it up and have it up there. And then and then we do the show, and then we might do down the road. One of the things you're going to start to see is roll out our workshops, and these workshops are going to be recorded on YouTube. They'll be done in Zoom, but recorded on Zoom on YouTube and streamed to YouTube, and you can ask questions. But then we may still have labs. So there's a more features to the system that we're kind of starting to slowly add, and you'll see us play with it this year. It probably won't be every week or that kind of thing. Next question.
Josh Kaufman, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Audio Day was one of the densest cast of luminaries. John Tatulis, Gary Trenda, Paul Selker, Dr. Michael Santucci, Cheryl Ottenritter, Glenn Sanders. Also mentioned was Michael Holmes and Michael Curtis. Who would be a good fit for where we want to take Audio Day in 2024?
I mean, the panelists have people that they the chances that it's a pretty long pass, but for some reason I become very like I've been watching a lot of Stuart Copeland stuff on his YouTube channel. I'm like, we got to figure out how to get Stuart Copeland on the show. I don't know if that's possible or not, but he does so much great stuff. And
can I tell you, he loves talking.
I know.
I've seen him on so many different things.
He's so good, and he's so matter of fact about stuff, and he just shows you when I grew up, I don't know what it's like now. I don't know what the rankings of drummers are right now. In the 80s, it was always is the best drummer in the world Stuart Copeland or Neil Peart, and there is actually a video on like that's what you'd always argue. That was the argument that you'd have about drummers in the 80s, at least where I grew up, and
with my friends, it was Copeland done.
Yeah.
Neil who?
So
Neil who?
Well, I mean, don't. That's sacrilege. I mean, we don't. I know we don't talk about religion here, but you can't talk down Neil Peart. So anyway, that's just inappropriate. So anyway, so I had to put my foot down there. So but there's actually a video at Stuart Copeland's house with Neil Peart playing the drums and Stuart Copeland was playing, I think, bass or guitar, and it was just like mind blowing. Like it was just get them both in the same room. And anyway, go ahead, Jeff.
Rick Rubin. Be a great choice.
I don't know how to do that, but so would want to.
Personally, someone I think would be fascinating would be Trevor Rabin. Especially, he's got a new album out, so maybe he'd like to promote that. And I'd love to play him our version of Leave It.
Yeah, that'd be great. Absolutely. Go, Bill.
Larnell Lewis, he's at Snarky Puppy and everywhere else. His ability to sit in a band and figure out with one listening exactly how to make perfect parts is spooky.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll think about one thing that I do want to do is try to bring bands on, like, or singers or artists or whatever. I think that there's something about the creative process. I think we want to be technical. You'll see in that format that I have kind of creators and creation and so on and so forth. But I think that, getting, someone on, we had Brian Vander Ark on in the past and Peter Hillman and Daria Musk. And I think that finding other bands to come on, while we're probably not going to end up moving to the plant is getting Mix A and Mix B up. And I think that we may try to, see if bands will come down and play, preferably ones that recorded albums there, but definitely see if we can't get some folks in to do that, because I think we can talk a lot about the technical, but sometimes you have to get back into why are we doing all this technical stuff, is so that the creators can do that. Yeah. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Samuel Nordvik in Norway. Mixing Station with David Schumann was one of my favorite audio shows of 2023.
That's great. It was a great session. Yeah, really, really great session. And so hopefully I have such a long list. What happens a lot of times when people are talking about stuff on the show, or when I see something, I simply just, it's not a very organized way of doing this, but I simply just I type the URL in and then I drag it into my bookmarks. Like I just drag it into the one right below it, just so I just keep it somewhere. Like I just got to hold on to it. And now I've been spending the last couple of days I don't do it a long time, but like a half an hour at a time, I'm starting to get those into folders so that I can, these are the audio ones, these are the video ideas, these are the things, and they're all stuff that we talked about or someone brought up in passing. Next question.
Dave Troutman in Edmonton, Canada. Mic labs might be a regular thing too. Panelists bring in mics to demonstrate various qualities each mic offers and the best applications for them.
There you go, Jeff.
Yeah, I think this would be a great one. We've started collecting lists of microphones that we have access to behind the scenes on the audio console. So, and then the question is it just for voice? Do we just demonstrate by talking into them, or do we also have instruments?
I think it'd be fun to do a couple of them, and I think it'd be fun to get a list. One of the things we are trying to do is make some partnerships with some of the resale partners that are out there, whether it's Sweetwater or B&H or others like that we can, say, hey, can you send us 5 mics or 8 mics or whatever, and just get them all in there. We did this with actually my very early podcast days. We had this Gear Media Tech was a podcast, and BSW was our partner, and they would just send us. They would just send me a box of all the things that needed to be. We carefully take them out and do all the tests, and talk about them on the show and thank BSW and then send them back. And hopefully we can maybe do that again. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, just because I work in the VO space a good little bit, it's an obsession. And there were hour-long discussions online and huge pages written about the difference between a 416 and anything else, TLM 103 or whatever. People, and this idea of you can make a particular mic sound more like other mics, but at some point the native character of mics does have an effect on things, and that's why they get picked. Also, the things like, you don't want a sensitive ribbon in front of something that puts out an incredibly loud sound pressure level because you'll ruin your mic with it. So there's a lot of technical detail about the right type of mic to use for the right type of recording.
Yeah, I know. I had to record some gunfire, and there was it was like a long discussion that I got into people about where to point the mic and what kind of mic, and and all the different things and what distance from the gun, and all those things became like this giant thing. So it's very, very different. And I also think that when we test the mics, they kind of have to be with the same person in the same place, because a lot of mics feel different completely by a different voice or a different so there's a lot of different pieces that we have to kind of figure out there as well. Next question.
Robert Sababity in Poland would like to hear more on audio correction, especially when the source recording has issues, different sound levels of speakers, echoes, distortion, background noise, and so forth and so forth.
Go to Andrew.
I love this topic because it involves troubleshooting. And also, I'm reading this question as being not just studio recording, but maybe when you're in a live environment as well. And studio recording can be a lot like when you're making adjustments driving a sports car, and you really have to learn what each control does. Live audio is, I equate it to steering a boat. If I do this, how much am I really turning? You know, if I'm in a sailboat, wait a minute, if I pull the rudder this way, why do I go that way? You know, that stuff is, a lot of it goes to how well you tune the system ahead of time, how much control you have over your environment. If you don't have control over your environment or enough control over your environment, then what do you do? And that it's taken me a career to learn, you know, a lot of that stuff. And I'm still learning every single show where I run into a challenge like that. So it's a wonderful topic, and we could really dive in.
Go ahead, Ronnie.
Yeah, I think of it at the same kind of. One of the things is that you can fix it in when you're doing it. Fixing things live in a live event is difficult, and if you don't know what you're doing, you could screw up things. And the other part is the post-processing, that we call it just repair or fixing. It's always much better to fix things when you are doing the recording, if you have time. In a live session where you have bands going on stage back to back, there is no time normally to do that, but you have to move quickly and just have every band doing their own mix or preset their own mix in the mixer. So you just change between the mixes as you go. And of course, choosing the right tool for the problem to solve the problems is really important. And then there is all the other stuff going on as well. So physics, technology.
Well, and I think that another show that could be really good is just really prepping for a live event, you know, in a room. So, you know, the use of, and it'd be fun if we could try to find a room or someone that would do it with us. But I think that, you know, where are we using pink noise? Where are we ringing the room out? Where are we doing, you know, like what does all that mean and why do we do it? I think that would be a really good session as well. Try to think about where we can do that as a venue. Next suggestion.
Guy Cochran, Seattle, Washington, inside the audio bag, or what's on a sound cart?
Yeah, sound carts and audio bags. I would say understanding your audio bag would be a good start. When I got the bag for my Scorpio, I got a K-Tech bag for my Scorpio, and understanding what all the gaps were and which direction I should use it in and everything else, I was like, I don't understand how this works. And then how it was one of those things, like I thought, when we first took it out, I was like, I don't need the back brace because we'll just throw it over your shoulder. And as soon as all that gear was on, I threw it on my shoulder. It took me literally like 2 minutes to go. And we're going to set this down, and I'm going to buy the back, you know, the back thing for the next show. And so, but yeah, so I think that just understanding, and what would be great is I think we get somebody from K-Tech to come on and actually walk us through the bag. That wouldn't be hard. I can probably reach out. I know some folks there. But it'd be fun to do that, to talk about sound bags, because man, the most amazing thing about a sound bag, especially like, again, for the Scorpio that I put mine in, you just get how much they thought it out. Like how much there's all these people using this and they figured out exactly how to build a bag that was just, because you go, I wish it did. And then you're like, oh, they did. like they thought of that. And the cables and everything else, I think it'd be really fun to do that. And the sound card as well. So I think that it's a great suggestion. Next suggestion.
Brody Hefner, New York City. I'm listening to a BBC podcast with a remarkable and subtle soundscape by Tim Nielsen of Skywalker Sound, doing his first podcast audio. Would be great to hear him or others on the process of podcast sound design.
Yeah, I thought that the Odd House was a really good one where I have to admit, even I didn't think about the amount of posts that they were doing to those Wonderly podcasts. I mean, they're doing them in Atmos, and they are doing, you know, these like 80 tracks of stuff that they're putting in there. It's kind of amazing. And I think definitely that post-production, as well as I'd love to get someone on from NPR to just talk about how they, you know, the kind of the process of what they do. They have a book out that talks about it a little bit, but I'd love to, you know, get someone from NPR to talk about, because they're picking up all these sounds. And the other one that I'd love to bring on is This American Life, because the amount of, like, they tell a story, but they really build up this entire theater, in your mind, with what they're doing, which I think This American Life is the best at it, right now, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
If we're doing that, it might be, I wonder if we could reach out to the Tiny Desk concert people, because that must be interesting, because they don't know whether it's going to be a solo person with a guitar or 7 pieces in a tiny room. And it's just really an office space that's got a bunch of stuff on shelves behind them. So that must be an odd audio world to work in with all that difference of performance constantly.
I mostly would just love to talk to them about the process of starting Tiny Desk, because, I think some of the audio is sometimes a big challenge there, but the fact that they went from, the Cranberries to Taylor Swift, over, a decade, of just doing it over and over and over again, and slowly showing that they could do something great, and then slowly building that up to a point where they could get anybody to show up at Tiny Desk and do it. Which is, I thought that just talking to them about that, almost as the creative process of getting people to do that.
To your point, to be able to do a solo mega artist and have them not bring the band in. I mean, that I always said when I was going to concerts, it's one thing to listen to them on a record with great producers and the rest of that. To have them show up with a guitar and still be able to do an incredibly compelling performance is, I think, a whole different level of talent from when you have bands.
When you have an artist that can do that, that's the best, in my opinion.
Totally.
Like someone who comes down and just totally stripped down. Let me play play something for you. I had we were doing an event at AT&T Park with Dave Matthews, and there was a lot of rain, and there was there was an awning over top of the audio desk, which filled up with water, and we started seeing it fill up, and there was a bunch of discussions like, I wonder what's going to happen to that awning if it keeps raining. Oh, I'll tell you what happened. It fell. And it dumped, I don't know, 1,000 gallons of water onto the Digico. It was like boom. And Dave Matthews did not miss a beat. He walked out there, plugged in his guitar, they rewired it or whatever, and he played the rest of the concert. And I think that they slowly wired a couple of other people to play little drums in the background. And it's the best concert I've seen Dave Matthews a couple of times that I haven't worked. I wasn't working. and the best. Like, just, he's so good, and you realize it when he gets up there about how good he is at what he does, that you don't need all the rest of the stuff, and anyway, it was just amazing to have a giant stadium and Dave Matthews there playing on his guitar. It was just really cool. So hopefully we'll see more of that. Yeah, next question.
John Snyder, Reno, Nevada. Topic idea: what are the special considerations for different sizes of venues? For example, for 50 people, 500 people, or 5,000 people?
You go ahead, Andy.
And yeah, what do you do differently, and what do you do the same? Because there are certain things you do that you treat, like speaker placement, for example. You approach that the same no matter what size venue it is. What you use obviously is going to change. How many components you use, where you put things are going to change. But the approach to figuring that out is actually very similar from one size space to another. And then as far as, obviously things change. The acoustics of a small room holding 50 people is going to be completely different than, a small stadium or a large auditorium or hotel ballroom, which is very common in my world. So, yeah, good topic.
Next suggestion.
Samuel Nordvik, back again from Norway. The shows with basic audio theory were interesting and useful.
Yeah, I think we skip over that a lot. I think a lot of us just figure out how to get something done, and then let's add a plug-in or whatever. But really backing up and talking through what those are. We may go back and retouch on ones we've done in the past, because I think it's worth. Sometimes it's a new set of people, new set of questions, and we're better at talking about those things. And so I think that expect us to do a little bit of the old stuff again, and but also continue to add new basics. Next,
plus Jeff is so good, and so is Andy and everybody else. But we have so many people who are so good at making simple what is not simple. Wow,
absolutely, yeah. So we'll keep brainstorming on that one. Next suggestion.
Josh Kaufman, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Oh,
right. Yeah.
No, it's Dave Troutman. Yes, Dave Troutman, Edmonton, Canada. Pick one instrument and show various ways to mic and record it.
Go, Joe.
I love this. What instrument, Dave? What would you like?
Let's do an oboe.
English horn.
Yeah.
It's the better oboe.
The better oboe.
Oh, there's a religious war right there. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I've read so much over the course of my career about people who are just really obsessive about, the reason I use this mic on this trumpet for this thing, and I didn't pick any of the top 10 normally used ones, was this kind of flavor that it imparted. I'm just fascinated by that. It's like watching a good chef figure out, I've got different coriander this time, so I changed the other parts of my recipe because this is stronger or weaker than the other thing. I think that's such a fascinating look at the incredible detail that really high level performers put into those kind of things.
Hamilton's probably above our pay grade, but the Hamilton, there's a did a Hamilton coverage where they talked about how they mic'd all the really good. It'd be really fun to do a Q&A with someone in theater, like just talking about all the mics and all the bits and pieces. And because they build all the mics for every single person custom, everything is built from scratch. It's amazing. Go ahead, Andrew. I mean, not scratch. They buy the mics, but how they mount the mounts are all built from scratch. Go ahead. We're building our own labs.
I'm inventing a microphone.
Exactly.
This one is for this guy.
Exactly.
Andrew. This question gave me the idea, not just one mic or one instrument, different miking techniques. How about a different type of band? Like an Indian band, a Native American band, an Indian band like as in Pakistan, the oud. How do you mic an oud? How do you mic a djembe or there's so many exotic instruments. And every once in a while I get to work on one of those shows and I usually am asking the band, how do you mic your instrument? That's how I learned. And then I know that okay, that's a drum with two heads. I do both heads. Things like that are just, I love that kind of stuff. And I know Jeff's got a lot of experience in other areas, not just classical music and jazz, but also in other, I'm sure, miking up other stuff that I'd love to learn your techniques.
I can't remember what it was, but one time I literally on stage, I looked at the guy and go, where does the noise come from? Put a mic there.
Or like you get that piano where you got to stick your head. I'm like, where does this thing sound best to mic? Not just use the standard miking technique that you're used to doing.
Yeah, and I think when we pass that also, I don't know if this is kind of people go one way or the other one, but I'd love to have someone talk about a theremin. Would be a really fun. There was I don't know what happened. In YouTube, the problem that I get into is I see something that shows up on my For You page, and then I spend the next 2 hours watching. I 2 hours watching theremin. There's one woman that does a lot of it in Europe, and just watched all these orchestral. They have all these orchestral things all mixed into it, and it was really, really interesting. Go ahead, Jeff.
Oh, just thinking weird instruments. How do you mic rice being dropped onto cymbals on the floor, or dry leaves crunched on a orchestral bass drum? Yes, I've been asked to do that.
Well, and we haven't done a lot of effects recording, for a long time, so we should come back to that. Next question.
Josh Kaufman, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Let's talk vendors. In 2023, we hosted Sound Devices, Spark Street Digital, Zaxcom, Kilohertz, Phase Plant, Elk Live, Prosacoustics, that's always hard for me, Lectrosonics, Mixing Station, and CalRec.
Yeah, we're getting there. we got a lot of, and I think that one of the things I want to do. I mean, we definitely. What I like about what we did, and for the most part, is we didn't. It's not like we're bringing Yamaha or Behringer on. I mean, which we'd be happy to bring on if they had something new that they wanted to show. But what I like about it is we're trying to find things that are gonna pique your interest. That you're gonna go, like that's something new or something different that I haven't seen before. And so, and I think that one of the things that will be. I'm going to try to get down to NAMM for at the end of January, and oftentimes we go to those. That's where it really sparks. We'll have a long list of things that we saw that you wouldn't see on the web that we can start to bring on. We did that a little bit last year with NAB and SIGGRAPH, bringing people in right afterwards, and so we'll see how that goes. Next comment.
Douglas Carmichael, Understanding Audio Networking, Dante, SoundGrid, and Direct Out Devices, Prodigy, MCMP et al.
Go ahead, Andy.
It's a big topic because it isn't just Dante. There's AVB is still a valid format. Milan has been on the rise for a while now. And I think that this is one of those topics where you could have probably a 2 or 3 parter. The first part being more general overview, and then getting into more of like how do you, since Dante is still the predominant form of transport, best practices for that and whatnot. We've touched on it a lot in, I think, the last couple of years, but we could dig deeper.
Absolutely. Next comment.
Guy Cochran, Seattle, Washington. What makes a good live mix for the venue versus for the live stream or broadcast?
Go ahead, Andy.
Again, one of my favorite topics, because if your live PA system is not tuned well, it really affects your records and your live streaming quality. And that's where I think that topic needs to start. It's a good topic because you have to work backwards a lot of the time.
And some of it's the mix, and other things are like we can't broadcast copywritten music, so we have things like where we have video with 4 tracks, so 2 tracks are going out to the venue, and the other 2 tracks are routed so that we get something completely different or something fairly different for the actual stream. And those are the kind of things to think about. It's definitely probably an hour there. Next comment.
Sean Schor, I believe, in Northern Virginia. What about cable management tips, tricks, or products at indoor and outdoor venues from small to large to protect the patrons?
It's probably a Friday session. I mean, for just cable management, because it's all the different cables and all the different things that we're doing and everything else. But I think that's it. We've talked about it in the past. We'll talk about it in the future. It's actually more important than many other things that people think about because your cable management poor cable management can lead to a lot of trouble that you didn't expect. Next question.
Danny Grizzle, Longview, Texas, has this one. It would be interesting to hear a discussion of specific venues, like a top 10 list, to rip off Rick Beato. What makes this room great, from architectural design to staff and facilities?
Go ahead, Jeff.
There could be so many individual top 10 lists in that top 10 list. Acoustics for acoustic music, classical music, acoustics for amplified music. Load-in ease. There'd be a bottom 10 list for load-in ease, I'm sure, as well. I mean, coffee and restaurants nearby, top 10 list.
I think that there's a venue again for a Friday session of just venues that are good for doing events in and what makes a venue good at doing an event in. As there's acoustics, which we could do on a Wednesday, and then on Friday there's just what makes it good to that they have elevators. Like I had one. When we walked through it, we shot the wrong way, and we didn't see that there was a 2-inch lip in the sidewalk, or the little back area behind the building. I lost 2 hours because we had to lift every case over that 2 hour. That was the only way in. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, and I just think that industry has gotten so much more sophisticated than it was when I was a kid. When I was watching live shows, mostly in my 20s and 30s, it sounded good, but not great. The Rady Shell that they just rebuilt here in San Diego, I've been to 3 concerts with 3 different kinds of music, and in every case, the sound in that outdoor venue for 5, 6, 7,000, I don't know what the capacity is, was as good as in my living room listening to music. The level of fidelity in these outdoor spaces with really good acoustic engineers working on them has really elevated, and I'm just super impressed.
Let's go to the next question.
Samuel Nordvik would be interested in diving into Reaper for audio editing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we have some experts internally that can do that. I think that even just walkthroughs of experts within certain within different apps, just to show what they like about the app and what makes it great. Next question.
Next one comes from Guy Cochran in Seattle. Dante Day.
Yeah, getting Audinate on here. I'm kind of surprised we haven't done that yet. One of the things I want to do is, they put out these 3 or 4 day certification courses, and I'm trying to have us all jump on it and just take it all together and then do our own little labs and talk about it afterwards. So a bunch of us already have that information. I just haven't. Every time I want to do it, I have some conflict comes up. But with that and Resolve and some of the other ones that are happening regularly. Next comment.
Robert Soji in Los Angeles, recording live music with Ambisonics.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, Ambisonics is such a fascinating topic. Not only I'd love to see this expand from recording live music to actually streaming and how to handle the post-processing of ambisonics in a live streaming situation.
And we talked about that a little bit of how we're doing it for some really basic stuff for the conference coverage, but there's a lot more to dig out there of how to do that. So definitely expect us to talk a lot more about ambisonics, especially as the new Apple headset comes out now, looking like February. Next question.
Anatomy of a Large-Scale Festival Tour comes from Douglas Carmichael for those that dwell in the small venue world.
Go ahead, Andy.
Not my world, but I know at least 2 or 3 people that could speak to that that would be great guests. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to talk. I mean, when I talked to large venue folks, it was funny. Someone was showing me a lighting rig for a big tour, and they were like, and it all fits into this piece of the lighting rig all fits into one truck. And I realized they're thinking about an entirely different thing, which is not just how it looks, but how are they going to get it from city to city? And I think that would be a really fun thing to discuss. Next comment.
Paul Wallace, Hot Springs, Arkansas. The Tula microphone, is it a joke or one of the greatest mics ever?
I think it's a good question. I don't know if we could fill a whole hour with the Tula mic, but talking about some of these like less expensive or more specialty mics might be interesting as a whole. Next comment.
Ronnie Hofzoe, Tromsø, Norway. DAW principles, digital audio workstation principles, how to choose, set up, and use a DAW with a 10,000-foot overview of software and related hardware.
Yeah, it's a great one. Yeah, I think that a lot of folks haven't done that. Just think of, very basic ideas, or they just start hacking through it, but they don't. What are the overall principles of the DAW? Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, I guess mine is more of a question about what we want to see in second hours. Do we want sort of an overview of DAW and then sort of a second hour on each of the major DAWs? Because I see we had a Reaper question before. We had a Logic question coming up. It's like maybe we need to organize it along those lines if there's enough interest for that many shows dedicated to DAW.
Yeah, I don't know if we would do that many shows dedicated to DAWs, but I think that a show next year that starts off with the principles of DAW and then talk about the different major DAWs that people are using and what makes them better or worse, and have some experts on each one of those come on and talk about whether it's Logic or Reaper or Pro Tools or all the many other ones. There's so many. Go ahead, Ronnie.
Yeah, exactly. Start with a series. The first kickoff is an overview, 10,000 foot overview, and then you just go into each and every one of those, if it's Logic or if it's Reaper or whatever it is. So I think that's a good idea. You asked me about the Zoom app. I have my Zoom app up on my iPad. Yeah. So this is video for tomorrow. This is my ZV-E10 camera going into, so you can see yourself.
That's pretty cool. Is that an iPad or an iPhone?
This is an iPad.
Oh yeah, because I think that what we're trying to figure out is the iPhone, but it's good to have the iPad as well. So that's fantastic.
Testing it next. Downloading it as we speak.
Excellent. All right, next comment.
Dave Troutman, Edmonton, Canada. Virtual drum kits.
Yeah, and I guess my question would be virtual drum kits or electronic drum kits. My daughter thankfully has an electronic drum kit. so
it is the father in the house.
and it is truly amazing that it's MIDI controlled. She downloads to Moises, rips out, separates all the tracks, and then she can turn the drum up and down and either play or not play with it. It goes Bluetooth into the drum set, so she's hearing her drums in a headset while she's playing to the music that she's trying to learn how to play to. The tech future. Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, this could kind of break in half. There's the sound module generating the drum sounds from the MIDI, and then there's the physical electronic drum kit, the actual interface for the human. And there we're going to need a few drummers to weigh in on that, because one is not enough. That's another religious topic about acoustic versus electronic drums. There have been vast improvements in the feel of electronic drums.
Well, and we got kind of a middle of the road one, not like the lowest cost ones, but definitely not the expensive ones. But she goes back, she plays in regular drums. She just practices in the house with the electronic ones. But yeah, I think that talking back and forth would be great. Yeah, next question.
Khalid Al-Jamaya in Hassa, Saudi Arabia. iOS and Mac OS automation. Maybe Sal Segoyan as a guest?
It's probably a Friday session, but Sal's an old friend. It'd be easy to get him on. And I think we almost had him on in the fall before we had to kind of shift where our hardware was. And so he was all ready to go and show some stuff. And so I don't think it'll be a problem to get Sal on. So we'll definitely get that in. Next comment.
Sal, Robert Soji in Los Angeles. Any hour with Logic Pro?
Yeah, so to go back to that, I think that's doing that would make sense about talking about all the DAWs. It might be useful to start talking. I mean, as we talk more and more about surround, is to talk about surround in Logic or even surround in Pro Tools and so on and so forth. So those are the two big ones, I think, for that type of thing. I mean, there's other ones that do it, Nuendo and many others, but I think those are probably the two of them are probably some of the biggest ones that are used. Next question.
Roscoe Jones, Madison, Indiana. How audio is handled in the various NLEs and or round tripping tips?
Go, Jeff.
Yeah, this is a great subject. I primarily work audio in Pro Tools. I do video in Final Cut and Resolve, and tend to do the audio in Pro Tools, and so going back and forth between those is interesting. Also, the workflow for certain types of processing, mainly I'm thinking Isotope and Melodyne for doing noise reduction and cleanup and pitch correction and timing correction. That sort of works as a round tripping into the app. Make your corrections to your audio, bring it back into your DAW. So that kind of workflow between multiple apps is really interesting.
Absolutely. Next comment.
Vic Hernandez in Springfield, Missouri. An update on the remotes.
Yes, we should. The next time there's an update on the remotes, we should get them in there. We're waiting for the next song. Whenever it comes out, they're kind of like it's a secretive group. You just don't know when there's going to be another song pops out. Go ahead, Jeff.
The remotes are working. So we have a song in process, and some of that's been delayed by personal issues, but we are still processing through songs.
That's great.
And if anyone out there is interested in joining us, look on Discord for the Remotes Band and just head on in there and say hello, and we'll get you into the group.
Go, Bill.
Can I just note, if you decide to do this, you will meet a great group of people and you will learn so much it's almost scary.
Next comment.
Cindy Drozda in Erie, Colorado. Overview of head-mounted mics and what the different ones do well or not.
Yeah, definitely. Like breaking down what the different ones do would be great. So we'll see if we can get that in there. Next comment.
Douglas Carmichael, a tour of Claire Global and or Rock Lidditz.
I don't think they'll give us a tour, but we might be able to try to get somebody on to talk about stuff that happens there. I think they like being famous inside of our industry. They don't like being famous outside of the industry because there's a lot of people wandering around there. Next comment.
Ronnie Hofsoy, Tromsø, Norway. Use of digital workflow and plugins for different use cases to improve different types of production, both live and for recording.
Yeah, I think that one's so big that I think we want to think about specifics, like what, I think that's probably what you're listing there is probably 5 or 6 different shows. But I do think it makes sense of just really thinking about, what you're going to use there. Absolutely. From podcasting to music to news to all those bits and pieces. Next comment.
Dave Troutman in Edmonton, Canada. How to handle performers and not just their strange needs.
Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, I mean, this is training for being like when you're in contact with performers as like, for example, A2s in the corporate world, what do you say? What don't you say? Things like that are really important. And it does apply also to music performers as well. And a lot of it, frankly, is just being polite. And we can get into that, but it's also how do you present yourself as a technician or not?
I think it's useful because, like, for instance, when we look at A2s, we are much more conscious about being client facing than A1s. A1s are kind of like they're back there. We're like, they're really good at what they do. We're not that worried about it. A2s, we're like, is that going to scare the client? So it's a much different view there. Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, in amplified musical theater and opera, thinking about wiring actors with hidden microphones, and that's interfacing with the costume department, and then that's actually interfacing with the performers, and that's a very, you're inside people's personal space, so that's a thing that you need to handle with grace and politeness and asking permission and explaining what's going to happen. So probably going through that could help people get the skills to do that.
And there's so many
correctly.
different ways of miking that, so there's how do you, there's in some cases, how do you mic someone you just walked up to? How do you mic someone for corporate? How do you mic someone for stage? How do you mic someone for film? How do you, like there's all these different permutations of that. So it's, it's interesting. Last comment.
Danny Grizzle, Longview, Texas, recurring topic, war stories.
I think you have to do it at least once a year. Like here's a war story day where we just talk about crazy things that happen, because I think it's important. I like watching fails. There's a fail army on YouTube, and I don't watch it a lot, but I'll watch it maybe once a week. I love like the concept of thinking about all the things that could go wrong. And I think that when we tell war stories, in some cases, those are telling you like, hey, if you see a lot of water or you see a lot of something, these are things, but these are kind of almost spreading, there's I think of it as like, there's a thing called crow funerals. If a crow dies, you'll see like 60 crows all around it trying to figure out how it died so they don't do the same thing. And that's the best we know. That's what it's doing. I don't think they feel bad for the crow. I think they just want to make sure that they understand like what killed it, or look at the environment around it. And so so I think that this is kind of like when we talk about some of the crazy fails or the crazy events that we did, it's a little bit like a crow funeral. Maybe we can call them crow funerals. Anyway, go ahead, Andy.
I think related to this topic would be another topic of how did you back up your show? Like, for example, we've mic'd people up with lavs and something's happened. What do you do then? And that's all. And that covers everything, including video and lighting and all of that. Like, what do you do when there's a fail to recover so that you can keep your client and they'll call you next time because you did the right thing to save the show?
On our interviews, we have a lav oftentimes, and then we have 2 shotguns and 1 shotgun down low. And someone will ask me like, why do you have so many mics? We're only going to use one of them. I'm like, yeah, but things can go wrong, and I like to have 4 ways out of this building. All right, great second hour. So I think a great second hour about second hours. I think we've got a lot of good protein to work with there. Really appreciate everybody throwing in their 2 cents. It's really, really important. It really makes our job much easier, because not only does it make it quicker for us to think about what those things might be, but it also allows us to make sure that what we're thinking about are things that you actually suggested as producers, as opposed to what we think might be interesting. I think we always want to keep on coming back to what you're doing there. We don't get to all of them. A lot of that has to do with logistics of can we find someone and everything else. But we really will do the best we can to get as many of those in for next year as possible. So thank you so much for throwing those in. Thanks to the panelists for all being here and being part of this conversation. It's always great to see everybody here. We can't do it without you. And thanks to, again, the producers for the questions in the first end, the suggestions in the second hour, and the incredible team that even between Christmas and New Year's are making sure that we have a great show every single day, 7 days a week. Amazing work. We traveled, wait for it, drum roll. How do we make this drum roll? Drum roll, we traveled 140,000 miles today, 225,000 kilometers, and that is 1.111 billion, not million, billion bananas for scale. All right, let's jump into after hours. So much potassium. So many. Don't slip on all the... Where do we put all the bananas? That's what I want to know.
Who brought the cinnamon? Cinnamon on bananas is really good.
Really? I've never had cinnamon on bananas. That sounds like crazy.
And chocolate.
Cinnamon glaze?
Chocolate's good on everything.
Yeah.
I haven't had chocolate on steak, but I'm pretty sure it would work.
Bananas on almond butter or butter.
I make my own cashew butter now. It's so good. Cuisinart. It's a wonder machine. All right, I'm out of here. See you guys. Thanks so much.
Cheers.